Good evening. I'd like to bring to order the June, what's today's date? 6th. Special deliberative meeting of the Cohasset Select Board. This is a meeting that is technically open to the public, but is a deliberative meeting, which means we deliberate amongst the Select Board and our advisor, and although members of the public may be here, and we do have some here, and some may come later, they are observers, and they do not speak, nor if we ask them any questions, they're just not part of the process. I'd like to call this meeting to order again, and I'd like to check in with a roll call. I'm Jack Creighton, I'm the chair.
Jean Hickfield here.
Paul Grady here.
Ray Evans here.
Diane Kennedy here.
And the other people in the room will please, who are officially here, please identify yourself.
I'm Michelle Leary. I'm Kim Roy, the Human Resources Director. Tricia Casey.
And we have our public relations, Justin, I always mispronounce your name. Schreier.
Yeah.
Purpose of this meeting is for us to review what the previous select board had identified as townwide goals and things for the select board to move forward on. But probably what we really want to do is we want to throw together our thoughts about what are the pressing issues for Cohasset and what we think as a select board that we can do to advance those issues. So as we're discussing this, please keep in mind the focus on planning for the coming year and focus on things that are actually achievable by the select board and ways in which we might do that. We have our facilitator. You want to facilitate?
Thank you. It's good to be back here to see some familiar faces and also some new staff faces, and welcome to Paul as a new member of the board. So most of us are pretty familiar with the goal setting process. We are changing it a little up this year. In speaking with Jack, it's pretty much what he just said. We really want to focus and spend the bulk of our time this evening on what we hope we can really achieve as a select board in the next 12 months. We sent out a reflective survey to sort of gain your insights and thoughts about what some of those goals might be, some of the items and issues facing the community. But we're really looking for the next couple of hours to have informal, free-flow discussion of what you, as a member of a 5-person select board, see, so that as a group together, the board can come together and hopefully find some stuff to work on in the past year. I have about a 10-minute deck to go through with you. Some of it will be familiar, just to sort of set the table for what we're going to be doing the next few hours. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. It's not rocket science. I'm sure in your place of employment or in the course of your career, you've done goal setting, so I don't pretend to be here to teach you anything you don't already know. So, but it's always helpful to review because it's been 11 months since we sat in this room and did it before. So just to briefly go over the agenda, and for the folks watching at home, I'm going to quickly do an overview of the workshop and goal setting, who does what. I think it's really important as we go through a goal setting process or any kind of strategic planning, one of the first fundamental steps is to understand respective roles and responsibilities. What is the select board's role? What is the staff's role? What is the town manager's role? What, if anything, does the charter say relative to that? Before we can go forward, we have to look back, but we're just going to briefly look at what our FY22 goals were that the select board determined last year. But again, we really want to focus on the next 12 months. And then we'll have discussion, as I said, where are we, where do we want to go? We'll review, I've compiled all the responses from the surveys that I received and what we're going to work on the current year. And then we'll talk about how we get at a consensus after we talk about these items and ideas and issues that you've identified or bubble up through our discussion in the next 60 to 9 minutes, and what's really achievable. And speaking with Jack, we don't want to lose track of things that are longer term issues, but we also want to see what might really be achievable in the near term and the short term, because we've been dealing with some big issues the last 2 years. And some things that we've been working on and had good momentum slowed down or even came to a standstill or didn't pan out the way that we thought once we started down that track. So it's really important for the chair to have us be top of mind as far as what we might be able to do this year. And also, we always consider what are the carryovers for FY22, if there are any, because we always can't accomplish anything in a given year, but again, not to look, part of strategic planning is to always know that not only we're looking at the short term, we're looking at the long term. So, and then of course, once we determine what those goals are for FY23, what are the action steps, what are the follow-ups, who's responsible for what? And then hopefully we'll have you all out of here by 8 o'clock. So I've passed out everything that's on this deck so that you can, if it gets too small or you can't see it far away, and some of the font does get a little smaller when we get into the responses of the survey. But one of the things that I really like to do when I meet with folks is really, it's important that this be a benefit to you, that I could sit here and talk for 2 hours and tell you how to do this and that, but really it's only meaningful as you as a board member feel like it's a benefit to you to have this discussion with your colleagues as you build a team to go forward the next year. So I'd briefly like to ask you to think a moment about what your expectations are for the next couple of hours, knowing that we're at a goal-setting workshop, and what you at least hope to achieve by the end of our time together. So if you just
Start
feel
with
free,
Diane.
whatever you want, Mr. Chair.
Diane.
Sure. I guess one of the questions I had, which is, because we use our annual goals to then basically set Chris's goals. So Chris's goals are kind of the action steps that get us to the policy goals that we arrive at here. So, you know, I look back at last year's goals and, you know, that's what we've been working on. And at the time, last year, we thought that they were all achievable. For example, the comprehensive zoning revision. So what I hope is, I hope that we have great conversation about, you know, about where we're going, but I don't see how this is so different than what we've been doing in the past. You know, are we looking to actually get specific projects, kind of a consensus on the board for that, or are we, again, going after these, you know, initiate public facilities capital planning, say, for example, for last year? That, to me, would have been what we've always done and what we could do again this year, develop a comprehensive communication structure. So I just want to understand if we're looking to drill down a little bit further on that, on those kinds of policy goals.
I could address that, both. We want to get an overall thing of what we want to do,
Yeah.
but I think it's important that we identify some very specific, very granular things that we can say that we could do, because it's very easy to get lost in theoretical, but I think underlying all of this, we want to keep our eyes on things that we can actually get done. But there's no, one is not at the expense of the other. Good point, Diane.
Yeah, and just, you know, on that, I mean, in filling out my questionnaire for this, you know, there's so many achievable projects that have been teed up for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, that I want to make sure we don't lose track of. Harbor infrastructure, Elm Street corridor, zoning bylaw, you know, maybe it's we only bring back the one that failed at special town meetings. So those are the kinds of things that I'm really interested in trying to walk away from tonight with some kind of a, yes, we're going to make sure we push this over the finish line, town hall, that kind of thing, if you want granular.
Corey?
I think, you know, largely what Diane said, I'll support. One thing that's been on my mind is that I always thought that we should really kind of bifurcate our goals here, and that a lot of the goals we've talked about have been ones, and it's in the packet, where we have to rely on town staff and Chris Senior, and we all pull together. Those are really important. However, I think we can also identify goals that the board can do itself, that we don't rely. Are there policy goals? Are there ways that we deal with subcommittees? We don't need town staff for that, right? We can just do that here. So when I think about these goals, I think we should have our eye on two different things. One, what we want to work with town staff with, but the other thing is what are the things we can do ourselves that's going to make an immediate impact. And those are things that we can do really quick. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I hope we can, out of this, we can have, I don't want to say parallel tracks, but maybe 2 tracks of what we want to get done.
That's why we broke it into 2. So we have some granular things, but
Yeah.
we also have the, what do we as a board want to do that only we
Absolutely.
as a select board. Good point, Corey. Paul?
I think it's more important to me, personally, what do we as a town want to do? Not that what do we as a board want to do, not what the town manager wants to do for following his goals. And forgive me if I'm not paraphrasing it, but I think it's what, I like this communication. That's one of the most important things to me personally, is getting town input, getting consensus. What do they find important? Do we find Elm Street important? Do we find the harbor important? They all are. But what about the quote-unquote unattainables? You know, what about every other street in town? Where's the priorities? That's what I'm about, and that's where the communication, I think that goes through you, doesn't it?
Am I able to address the board?
On this limited, but.
Okay. Yes.
But
Good.
Sorry, I just wanted to
Okay,
make sure.
thank you. And is getting that outreach out, you know, explaining each and every item on the agenda clearly, succinctly, getting opinions, getting in, collating it, and coming up with that consensus. That's what I'd be for. Each and every one of the town hall, the street, and all the other ones are important. Schools, roads, but what does the town see? That's really what I'm kind of keyed up for.
Very good, thank you, Paul. Jean?
I think I'm a combination of all of everyone's inputs in terms of, I completely agree that there's a lot the select board should be doing at our level, and a part of that is communication. I think it also falls on our town staff to do that as well. And I think that we can have a whole variety of different goals under our bigger goals. So the way I thought about it and filled out the questionnaire was, you know, looking at our 3 existing goals. There's still a lot of work to be done under all of those existing goals. So what are the different specific goals that we can move forward towards, whether it's the select board, the town, or getting communication and input from our citizens to advance the ball, for example, on a capital plan, or on zoning, or on figuring out which projects to put on the ballot for August for a debt exclusion vote. Like, we have some really big decisions coming up, and I think we have to move with precision and specificity, but also, you know, receiving input from the town and, you know, all working together on a combination of everything in order to make it happen. And to me, that's where the specificity is important, because without it, we are losing time and we're not getting things done. And that was sort of a bit of my frustration last year in terms of we didn't have a specific enough plan, and so we weren't able to advance, I think, some key things that we wanted to, and we all agreed on. We just didn't have the pathway to get it done, whether it was a zoning bylaw or some other project.
Thank you, Jean. What I'm hearing from everybody really is that it's a lot of agreement. I think, and that probably speaks to that what we need to do is pretty clear to all of us. There are specific things that we don't want to lose track of, things that we've worked on, specific projects. We don't want to lose that in all of this. But I'm very impressed by everybody coming back to the broad themes, and then everybody also coming down to the very specific. So I think that's good. And by the way, I'm going to more facilitate what your opinions are than speak to what my opinions are. I think that's hopeful to move this board forward, because all of the people on the board have waged battles. You've gone out and met the public, you've listened to people, you hear for the great $1,100 in your salary amongst other things. So your opinions are valid, and your opinions come directly from the people, so I think we're doing very well.
Thank you. So, just so you have it for reference as our discussion goes on, these are your FY22 goals that we came to consensus, and you know the status of them, you know how they did or didn't play out in the past year in terms of the comprehensive communication structure, and that incorporates communication inbound and outbound. You have a major step in having Justin here, of course, that's new addition. The zoning bylaw group, the master plan implementation committee, and some of the challenges with that in the RFP, and then the public facilities capital planning, including and identifying funding options, which if we meet 10 years from now, or if we met 10 years ago, would probably still be here, because it's just one of the inherent challenges of working in a municipality and trying to get it all done. So quickly, I just want to review sort of the landscape here in terms of why we do goals, just because it helps to provide a methodology that we're trying to provide and measure outcomes for what you're doing. And it's also a performance management system, as Diane mentioned. Often what happens here is what the select board adopts as goals also becomes Chris's goals, and they trickle down and becomes the staff goals. So it lets the town and the citizenry and the residents know that they really have, the elected leaders actually have a plan. They sort of know what's out there and about what's on their plate, and at least have some methodology for trying to address the myriad of issues that are out there. And again, it's not on line item activities. I hope we all know that a goal is not a goal if it involves a monetary appropriation. An objective might be an appropriation, but the goal in and of itself can't be, I want to improve, the personnel system, so we will hire 4 people. If it's dependent on an appropriation, it really isn't a goal, because that's dependent on so many other things like funding availability, town meeting, public will, whatever. So we try to create a process for getting you to goals, because 5 of you are here. You all have ideas, needs, wants, as the chair noted. You've all been out talking to the public, you know what they have. So we're trying to take this huge kitchen sink, if you will, and sort of drill it all down to some areas of community of interest for the 5 of you to distill over the course of this discussion and say, this is what we believe is important for the next 2 months or 12 months. So again, your priorities, when we talk about all these dozens of items, is what is the priority? What's the top priority? The major items you need to address. High try is other items you want to address and try to fit in after you've prioritized the other ones. And then, of course, if is time or appropriations or funds, like additional state aid, ARPA money is a good example, a grant that you didn't think you were gonna get. Those are if types of things. So in terms of the discussion and the goals in general, your job as the administrative the policy body making of the community, is to set policy. Your job, one of the best jobs you are, most important jobs I think you're set with doing, is the strategic planning of the community, to set goals, to prioritize those goals for the community based on your feedback and knowledge and what you believe Cohasset should be working toward. And after you prioritize and establish those goals, set the objectives and the strategies for them. The town manager's role, along with his staff, is to implement those and to come up with the timeframes and the key result areas on how those policies and objectives that you set are achieved, and report back to you in progress on the reports. Take your direction if they need to pivot at some point, or you encounter an unintended stumbling block or consequence, and go there. So one is your big picture, and the staff is how you get there. So just a few things to ponder as we continue along with our discussion. And hopefully, if you did the survey, this also had you sort of beginning to think in this vein, is what's not happening that you wish was happening, what's happening that you wish would stop, what changes do you foresee in order to achieve the select board goals and increase credibility in the community. Our credibility as elected leaders leads to trust in the community, and without trust of our citizenry, we really can't do a lot because it's an uphill battle. So that's another reason why it's important to set goals. What are the consequences of not taking action? One of my favorite sayings is sometimes if you have a choice to make and don't make it, that in itself is a choice. So if you have undesirable results, if you do not take a certain action, what can you potentially mitigate potential negative impacts of? How will the changes take place? Who should manage it? What is the timetable? That's traditionally a staff responsibility, and what will the select board role be? So I have compiled the responses to the questionnaire that went out last Friday. But also, again, it's important to the chair, as we talked last week, that even though we're talking within this snapshot of time, the next 12 months, what do we need to make sure we don't lose track of? What can't go into that black hole? What can't fall through the cracks? I'm not going to go through these. I'll just briefly read the questions, and while we're having our discussion, you can read the responses that I received. It was just, I believe, 7 questions reflecting over the past 2 years and Cohasset's response to the pandemic, budget challenges and unexpected demands. What surprised you most in terms of the town's ability to pivot and address everything? What do you believe is the most pressing issue facing the town right now? Issue or issues, plural. Please list the top 5 to 7 items or issues you believe important for the select board to address in FY23. What services or programs do you think the town excels at? If there are is there an area or areas or an issue you think the town has not addressed or is lagging in a bit? If so, what is it and why? What is your laundry list of longer term items the select board must keep in mind so they don't fall through the cracks? If you had to choose 2 areas for the board to increase, expand, or create services in the next 12 months, what would they be? And if you had to choose 2 for the board to reduce, cut, or eliminate in the next 12 months, what would they be? And again, this is in the context of the goals you've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years and the goals that you'll identify to work on in the next 12 to 24 months. Finally, the last question is, do you believe in general that the current level of town services fulfills the expectations of residents? I've quickly summarized where there were points of connectivity in the responses that I received. And as you can see, as Jack mentioned too, we didn't hear a lot of disagreement when we went around the room when our expectations for the meeting were articulated. Zoning reform, infrastructure, communications, particularly to residents, and engagement of our citizenry, capital projects, sidewalks in particular, and parking issues. So again, that's not to say we're immediately going to zoom in and focus on these, but I think it's always helpful to sort of do a reflective environmental scan, because you do goals because you can't do it all. So this has to be some mechanism by which we can sort of try and find a way to drill down and work on some things that we know we can achieve. So that's a good segue into our open-ended discussion, Mr. Chair, and I'll hand it over to you.
Let's do like a lightning round. Take a second, think of the one issue that you want to, just one, and just throw it out there to, bang, 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 just to see what happens. Diane.
Well, I'm gonna go a little sideways on the question, because as we've been talking, and just to bring up something both Paul and Jean said, that kind of a light bulb went off in my head. So last year when we were having this discussion, we spent a lot of time talking about zoning, and zoning, and at that point, when we left here and then teed up some subsequent meetings with the different committees, we did have a plan. We did have a plan, and we tasked these working groups with going forward and working with the community and soliciting input on the various working group initiatives. And all of those projects, we spent a lot of time working on individually, because each of us had some assignment to one of the working groups. And I include any of the master plan groups. I include Harbor in this because the Harbor and master plan were the two bigger studies we did. And I think there's a plan, but there wasn't a closing plan. There wasn't, how do we bring this project to closure? We can, so each of these working groups spent a lot of time, I know with Elm Street, we had probably 7 public meetings with over 50 people there, at all of them. And then somebody raises, oh, well, what about this, or what about that? And then it just kind of takes on a life of its own, because we weren't, I think the problem is, maybe we weren't able to communicate effectively, properly, efficiently, whatever it was, to actually make the case. The zoning bylaw working group. I mean, we had the A team on the zoning bylaw working group talking about what is a priority, what is a deliverable. We went to special town meeting. It was something, and I wrote it in my discussion, that I hear about every day of the week. I hear about development, and we didn't make it work
Well,
because
why don't
people
we-
arrived at town meeting with
So
it.
you're analyzing that, but
Yeah.
for now, just to get a sense of the board, is there one issue and only one, just
Issue, project, or
just anything,
communication.
communicate, or,
Communication, but part 2, we talked last year about, and this is to your point, Paul, about there's 2 parts of communication, right? Inbound and outbound, right? So Justin, I'm glad you're here, and we were making some progress, and hopefully we're excited to see what you get done. Website, all this stuff, that's all outbound. But I think the big issue is, how do we get inbound? How do we get feedback from residents? Where do they go? How do we catalog it? How does it go to certain places? How do we even track resident issues? I mean, I mentioned in my comments that people who are frustrated is because they can't get the answers they want. And that's not because we don't have tons of people in town hall trying, it's just sometimes you get routed the wrong path. I think step 2 for communication, so for me, communication is still up there but now it's on the inbound. How do we respond?
Just trying to figure out, bang, bang, bang.
Yep.
So to, Paul?
Well, I'm gonna stick with these guys, communication, but I'm also involved with deadlines. And this young fellow gets his job done, then we'll get communication to the public. We'll have to work out ways to do that, be it surveys or anything like that, but deadlines. I think we have to start with communications, and it's like the blind leading the blind. Someone's gonna fall on board, more will fall on board. They start stepping up to the plate. Hey, wait a minute, we're being heard. But there is a deadline to that. We come up with our priorities, get it out, be it a survey, be it anything along those lines, and we have to have this in by, say, hypothetically, June 6th. And, we require and we need your input. You live here, you pay taxes here, it's your town. And we're just your voice. And that's all we are, really. We got elected to be the town's voice. So communication, to me, and deadlines is set a parameter and stick to it.
Thanks, Paul. Jane?
Yeah, I'd agree on the communications. I agree with Corey too about the intake. That inbound is really important. And I think not just waiting for people to come to us too. I think on all of these projects, whether it's zoning or infrastructure or capital projects, we all have various people telling us their opinions, and they may all be from one group or another group. I think what I feel like I'm always missing is a more overarching view of how all of the different groups feel and how that pans out in terms of, if questions were to go to the ballot, where's the town at? Is it heavily divided? Is there a great consensus on these issues? And so I think trying to proactively invite that discussion, hear the concerns, and address them is how you're going to, I think, be able to tackle some of this. So for example, zoning reform, having a more, proactive way to take in concerns about potential zoning bylaws elicit, you know, I don't wanna say the defenses, but you know, the concerns, so you can address them when you're at town meeting or right before, when people are saying, well, what about this? It's like, well, we thought about this and this is actually how it works. I think we're sort of missing some of that input channel, including to proactively reach out to people without overwhelming them, but to get more meaningful input and in order to also communicate effectively what is going on or isn't.
So we have a consensus of communication and also in and out. There are ways in which communication happens in and out. Are there some thoughts, again, of ways, of methods? You know, we have some things that Justin, you know, does, but, you know, Justin, we're talking, but that's one example. Open meetings, meetings, website. So what if you were to say two things that you think are important for in and two things that you're important for out, Diane?
Oh, do I have to go first? I want to think about this.
I can go first.
Okay, yeah, we should change it
Mix
up.
it up.
And next time Corey goes first.
So I actually put this in the communications bucket, and then that may not be the right place for it, but the remote voting, that's a huge participation issue, but it's also something that we need to really move forward and continue moving forward, and a lot of that is gonna be how we communicate with people. And so again, I'm not sure where that belongs, but I do have it in the communications bucket. But the two big ones, so I wanted to put a pin in that, I think I agree, the website, it's time. We have to do it. We need a citizens intake form. You know, we built one for our government website. We can build one and I think it's already underway for this one. And, you know, we need to have, through that website, a whole bunch of different things, like our select board materials, publicly available for all. We need to have, you know, better searching, usability, functionality for citizens to access town services, whether it's facility stickers, permit applications, there's technology that exists for all of this, and there's no reason we can't do it. So that's one issue, including with inbound. I think on outbound, what I would say there is, we need to prioritize our priorities. If zoning is our priority, we need to have a communication strategy for how we're going to do outbound communications, including inviting citizen input, a survey on, you know, X, Y, Z, a survey on, here's all the capital projects we have lined up. You know, tell us what you, like, here's the back and forth, here's where we are, here's the decision points, you know, really start to hone our very limited town resources, like you Justin, in on a few of the things that we as the board, where, you know, we set the priority for the town, so we should put the resources where those priorities are, and really have a robust strategy around that.
Paul?
I'm gonna probably piggyback on Gene a little bit on the communication, I think the webpage is getting the town, I think we'd all agree our webpage is rather antiquated. It's not easy to navigate. And I've heard that from a number of people going to town just to look at people, you know, family members if I said something. But that webpage should be interactive, easy to use, and someone brought this up some time ago. I understand there used to be in the paper a select board corner. You could add that into it, you know, with a select.
If there were a paper.
Members, if there was a paper, it's too bad.
That is
because-
a problem.
But it could be part of that webpage. And so most people can access a webpage nowadays. And they can look, they can offer input. If, say, Tim over there wanted to speak to Jack, Gene, Paul, Diane, or Corey, you can directly access that. And, you know, a response time should be expected and you should receive it. So I think really getting the ball rolling to get it out there would be the webpage, and that should be maybe a real priority, just to let people know that their select board means business.
Thank you. Lori?
So I'm trying to remember what the question was, but I think just the specific things, I mean.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, one is, you know, we use this in my business and technology and any support structure whatsoever, is some sort of, you know, the blunt word is a ticketing system, but an issue tracking system.
In and
This is inbound. This is inbound. Customer. The customers. These are our customers. Frankly, they pay taxes. They're customers, and we can have that customer service mindset when we approach these things. And there's a lot. If you think of customer service, there's a lot more creative solutions to these things. So an issue tracking thing. That way we can see, and that way we're not duplicating work either. Someone has an issue and it's been answered. That should be in the system, and we should know that, and that should be easy to repeat. And then we can, Justin, the data can guide us to say, hey, there's a lot of questions coming up about this issue. Wouldn't it be cool if we said something outbound about it? So integration of the inbound and the outbound, especially with issue tracking, but also really leveraging the ability of citizens to easily either do input or sign up for things. We've talked about email lists, right? Do you want to hear about rec? Do you want to hear about what is it that interests you? And you should be able to sign up, because I am a little bit worried about, we can spend all the time and effort communicating, but if we're just sending out stuff every 5 minutes, we're going to lose attention. So let the citizens decide what it is they want to pay attention to and get them that information really targeted. That's going to go a long way, because people are going to feel like they're being talked to, and the messaging is going to respond. They're going to respond to the messaging. So issue tracking and getting really smart about where we're targeting the messaging outbound.
Would it be fair to say that you might also say that leveraging your basic customer relationship software and programs, that's what they do?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a million
That's what I
options.
thought. I just,
Yeah, we've got this kind of, as you know, the private government divide is a big gap. So I'm not quite sure, and I'm going to let, we should lean on town staff to say what we can do, but,
okay.
yeah.
Diane, you've had all this time.
All this time to think, so I get to say, I agree with my colleagues.
Oh, now you're gonna
I want to
say-
tell a funny webpage story, because I have learned how to navigate and find everything on that webpage, because I've been at this a long time.
We can redirect the phone number to your cell phone now.
Well, until
Okay.
yesterday, I can't even remember what I was looking for. I could not, for the life of me, find anything on the webpage, so I am all in on making it as user-friendly as possible. And I think one of the things, Corey, that you mentioned that we've all been talking around is really trying to maybe establish like a CRM, a customer relationship management software
Yeah.
program, where people can sign up. So, Chris started a few years ago the 5 things, and I think Justin's doing that now. And those are great, but those are actually like what the select board corner was always when there was one, which is kind of a summary of the decisions and the what's going on and what's coming up kind of thing. And I think if we thought about all the residents as our constituents, as our customers, and gave them an opportunity to opt in on certain issues, it would help with the outbound. Because I'm thinking about like master plan, and even when we were doing the harbor plan, we sent out postcards to every house in the town.
Yeah.
Please come, please weigh in. Your input is important. And with the master plan, there were hundreds and hundreds of people that came out. And we got to that point where we had established some pretty significant priorities and felt that the community had bought into it, because we heard a lot about it. We were very proactive about putting the information out there. And that's why I'm like so passionate about not losing steam on those things, because there was input. And we all change every year, but that doesn't mean that those priorities aren't important to the community. So we have to find a better way of making sure those people are kept in the loop, updated on what's going on with, remember when you went to that meeting last week? Well, here we are now, and kind of doing the target outbound communications with people to meet their interests. A lot of people say, well, my street hasn't been paved. Do they know they live on a private way and that the town's not gonna pave their streets? They may have, if we had communicated properly 2 years ago when we passed a private way policy and went through the whole public process of what that all meant and how you would get your street teed up on the list, or what a tip list is and why we haven't taken care of the Beechwood 3A, intersection. So being able to try to push that out to targeted groups of people that have interests in certain areas, I think, and of course it's always available for everybody, but I think we should think about how we can do that, because I really believe so many of these things and issues at town meeting and questions that come up at the last minute. People engage at the last minute, it's absolutely the truth. But if we do a better job advancing everything, I think we'll feel more comfortable going into town meeting when decisions are getting made and saying, we've been talking about this for 2 years.
Do you mind if I just jump in one thing that I
No.
realized? We're at a really good moment for this, because when you sign on to Zoom meetings, you put in your email address.
Right.
We have this data. So we can follow people up and we can say, hey, thank you, Town of Cohasset, thank you for coming to this. If you'd like to learn more about, you signed on to planning, you signed to this, whatever. We already have this stuff. We
Or
can
serve on a committee.
Yeah, well, we can start doing the CRM data collection tomorrow. I mean, we actually could do this.
We do have to be sneaky about letting them know we're putting them on a committee when they apply.
Well, but Corey, to your point, you know, you could see if you had enough accurate and structured data,
Yeah.
you could do some really cool improvements, like, for example, if there's an issue at Cedar Acres Lane, you could
Water,
email
sewer, exactly, right.
the residents
Yep.
all from that, saying, hey, FYI, or if the water's, you know,
Yeah.
being flushed, yeah,
We're able to
the
do.
question is whether we have enough of that.
We don't, and I think we should start collecting it. I
Yeah,
think that's
maybe
an
we should.
active thing.
Maybe that's the first thing on
Well,
our
that's
list.
Well, that's
Yeah.
inbound. I mean, that's really getting,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
people
yeah.
to sign up and give you that data. That's
We
inbound
could,
marketing.
here's a specific task, we could put in like their tax bill or their water bill or something, a form. Here's, you know,
Fax this back. to
here are
me.
your 5 select board members, you know, they wanna hear from you, we wanna get you on a list, what are the issues that you're most, or the topics, not issues, you're most interested in, we'd like to put you, you know,
Sign up for town alerts. Yeah.
sign up for town alerts.
One of the big issues, and we saw it on the zoning bylaws, we've been through all this process, we've seen it in Harbor, you've been through all the process. 2 years later, you're starting to implement it, and people say, I have no idea what's going on. Is there a mechanism where we could use that data to remind people?
Absolutely.
You've been there.
Yeah, we can do that.
This would be something that would be, I think would be helpful, because it's a recurring, well, people forget, people didn't pay much attention in the beginning, or they hear that what the actual impact is going to be, and they say, well, I didn't realize it would mean this
Correct.
to my street, or
Mhm.
my neighborhood, or that neighborhood, and then suddenly we hear the hue and cry, we didn't know about it. So,
Right.
you know, is that a consensus, that dealing with this, with kind of, people don't remember, and now they say they never heard about it? Is this, you know, just yes or no around, do we think that that's an issue that we should be aware of?
Maybe just
Yes.
make it even higher level, just, you know, being smarter about who we reach out to, how we reach out to them, how we keep them updated, just being, smarter is not the right word, but being strategic about it.
But
Not-
you agree that
Absolutely,
that's-
yeah,
Right.
just
Is
was
there
gonna bring it up
anybody
another
who-
level, yeah.
You know, Paul and Jean, you,
I agree with it. I hear a lot in this town, it's pretty simple. I mean, we'll all agree, we're a beautiful coastal community. So the things that I hear a lot are our natural resources, including the harbor. I hear our infrastructure, and I hear zoning, that we're being overbuilt.
Yep.
And thank God for that exposed ledge. That was one of my last acts on the planning board. I'm not going to move to that one, it saved a couple, but I think a lot fell through the cracks on that, because at that last town meeting, which was kind of sad, we missed a good opportunity there, but
on the
because
zoning bylaw?
on the zoning bylaws, they worked
There
their
was
tail,
a-
they worked their
Town
tail
meeting
off.
before that.
Yeah, the town meeting before
Special,
that,
yeah.
and they worked their tails off, and,
For good reasons too, for all
yes,
good reasons.
and the deck was stacked against them, because the information got out. I think it's our job, it'd be inherent on us to get that communication out about the goods.
Absolutely.
What is the benefit of the single lot exemption?
Right.
What are the benefits of the
Yeah.
exposed ledge? What are the benefits? Some may be against it. Does that mean we're gonna take your house and tear it down? No. What does it mean about cleaning up the harbor? What it means about bringing back the fish, you know? It's just, if people see the goods, you know, they can always have an adverse opinion, but, again, that meeting was kind of a template, something really not to do, because people got, you had a key group that were against certain items on that, and they stacked the deck, and we didn't have the participation. Like you just said, Diane, you had people show up at some of the meetings. I've seen on planning board, when there's an item on the agenda that they care about, they turn out in force.
Absolutely.
And if people realized, what people are trying to do, and we communicate that clearly, then, you know, your harbor projects and the things like that are gonna come to fruition, you know, in the time that they can.
The real challenge is, it's always easier to vote no.
I was thinking the same
And
thing.
to use or, you know, I think what happened at special town meeting is still about that.
They all knew exactly, they, oh, we don't understand this.
Right,
They were there
right,
because
we
they
don't understand
understood.
this,
Because they
or,
understood
oh,
it
we never
perfectly.
do these things at special town meeting, wrong, like, and, but there are those people, and we know one that goes to, Elm Street, and, you know, the naysayers are very good at, you know, creating analysis paralysis, and so, and they are able to articulate, like, their job is to, you know, advocate for that kind of negative position. And nobody, because we all think, oh, we're elected and appointed officials, we're sitting around
Work
looking
hard.
critically over months and months and months, and we're getting input, and then we think we've got the perfectly baked cake, but we haven't done our sales job, and we underestimate what the naysayers bring to everything. Happened with town hall debt exclusion funding. You know, everything was teed up, it was right, we had all the arguments about why this building was needed, why it was gonna be a low impact, there was actually a public, action committee formed, funded mailings, but, you know, there were people that wanted it not to happen more so than wanted it, or at least,
So
you know,
this suggests
they
that,
pushed.
that having, kind of looking for the consensus, having a ongoing update functionality in our communications
Yeah.
Well-
is important.
And the communication has to go down a level, because what we're talking about here was all, it wasn't select board, it was town hall building, it was zoning bylaw, so we want to be sure that the subcommittees have the resources to do this messaging, because I think that's where things get a little tied up.
And I think those committees don't necessarily view it as their job either. I think they
No,
view
I-
it as
that-
that-
absolutely.
They view it as the select board's job.
Or town staff's
Or
job, right,
town
yeah,
staff's
exactly.
job to do
No, I
that.
concur completely.
And that
And they may not be
the-
able to do it, actually.
And yeah, that may
Maybe.
be ultimately the answer,
Right.
because they might not have that, you know, I don't wanna say capability, that's the wrong word for it, but that's not their technical expertise, right? It's
They're not as good as Tim getting the
it's
message out the
not-
way you do.
But it's not, it's
No,
just not.
And it shouldn't be, right.
And they don't have the access, and so I think for the bigger projects, particularly the big ticket, big controversial ones, I do think it's important to get a wide range of people, not just those who self-identify as caring about zoning. Because you're gonna get, you need enough people hearing the positives and the correct message, so to speak.
You need like a 10-to-1 ratio for that. That's, I mean, I
Yes.
think that's where,
This
It's
is
hard.
the American legal system, and you're a part of it. It's,
But
to put someone in jail or to win a case, you have to win 10 out of 10,
Yeah, right.
or 2/3.
Right.
The 1/3, or,
The challenge is, because so much of this work, the work that's in support of our goals are done by volunteer committee members. So while the staff manages a lot of the progress, like, these are volunteers, and it's really hard to get people, you know, I'm thinking about some of the people that spoke up against the article at special town meeting. What was it, residential?
Single
Single
lot
lot
exemption.
Single lot exemption.
Single lot exemption.
That was the big ticket, but
well, no, that got dropped, and then we had the driveway
the private way.
definitions,
the-
correct, yeah,
Right,
that's the
definitions,
one.
and
Right.
that's-
Right, so one
Right.
didn't even make it.
Right,
And then
right.
one got,
Right.
hijacked.
Right,
at form.
literally hijacked, and, you know, I think about the people that came at the end and kind of did the, and they probably wouldn't have wanted or been willing to participate in the process. That's kind of the problem. I think we just underestimated it, and we weren't prepared with the outbound communication, with the having built consensus before town meeting. I mean, our warrants, we can do a way better job giving,
Yeah.
and maybe it's not us,
Okay,
maybe,
so
I mean, I
warrants.
warrants an agenda, and I don't know, I would love to know how other towns do it, but other towns have very active League of Women Voters or something that say, this is what it means if you vote yes for this.
They also have
this is
warrants
the-"
that are like 50 pages long because they
Yeah.
have all the
Descriptions
And I'm not
and
quite sure if
pros
that's
and
a good.
cons.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's a good or bad
Right.
thing, but you know, it's an option.
But,
yeah.
Well-
but again, we weren't prepared with the.
No, not at all.
So I think we can rehash what happened in there, and we can learn, but part of the yeasty parts of politics is those things happen. I think our responsibility and the governmental thing should be that the information is readily available, that's what I've heard from everybody, easily found, and that we have ways for in and out. And if we do that, I mean, if the people may disagree, people get organized, I don't think we can necessarily do that, but what I'm hearing from everybody is that very robust communications, inbound, and thank you, Corey, for pointing out it's inbound and outbound, or outbound and
Yeah.
inbound, or whatever.
It's a
right?
yin and yang, big circle.
So, we're in good shape, with that, so we have the communications.
So let's think about this in terms of 12-month snapshot, what's we can actually achieve. We all have consensus that we're talking about communications, but we need to bifurcate that discussion because we're talking about administrative communications, okay? Operational, how do I get a building permit, how do I do this, to the big policy, town initiative, capital project.
Yep.
That's two different kinds of information
Absolutely.
that we need to get a handle on in terms of who's responsible for what, and we'll have to do it. To your point, there's customer relation management software, 311 systems they're typically called, which is a software program that does exactly what Corey said. It does the citizen intake form, it tracks it with a
Okay.
specific date, each department, boom, 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 tracks it back to the citizen. There's a multitude of companies that do it. It's not cheap, but every department is responsible for it. There are companies that do websites so that you can go and do exactly what you're saying, where you check off each issue that you're interested in. I want to know about planning board, I want to know about ZBA, I want to know about conservation, I want to know about council on aging. And it automatically, you can put your email in for that. So that stuff is doable. So, and again, so you're talking, I just want to make sure you're talking about what we can do in 12 months and that there's two different types of communication we're talking about. Because we're talking about maximizing citizen outreach through more effective communications. But you also want to increase and expand the systems for tracking and responding citizen inquiries and deadlines in a timely manner, right? So that captures
All of the above.
all of the above,
Yeah, that's great.
right?
Yeah, well done. Yeah, perfect.
So, how that manifests itself, that you can work out in the weeds with the staff. But the way, what you're talking about now, if staff were to do the data gathering and do the whatever, surveying's a great idea, but, there are, in this technological world, lots of things to have you do that stuff so you can focus on responding to the data that you're receiving instead of being the egg gatherer.
And that's, I think that's, and this is what I do professionally. It's just,
Yeah.
you can do so much without so much human resources.
Right.
You can be really smart with data and be really effective without having someone tabulating, and really spending their time in an Excel spreadsheet. We want to not do that. Like, we want to be,
Yeah.
we want to be very, very,
I
very
think we have a
lightweight.
consensus,
Yeah, absolutely.
So communications, we agree,
Yeah, I
Mr.
think
Chair,
we're
is a
all set.
goal
Right.
for FY '22.
Can I
And,
say
the great
something?
thing is you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
You can see what other communities do.
We track, in my office, we track highs and lows, customers, people coming in, different advertising methodology, what's more popular, what's gonna make a hit, what grabs people.
Absolutely.
And very successful, be it Google, be it different web, what's getting the most hits. It might be a simple mailer sometimes, but we track that, and we have the systems, the software for it, but I think, and I agree with everything everyone said, I think the first thing is to get that webpage up, and then we can start, you're in computers, right?
Yeah,
If
I'm
not
in web
mistaken.
design and e-commerce marketing.
So is to get that webpage up, then, like some of your talents, to start working with this guy here, and Justin, right?
Yes, sir. That's it.
And blow the hell out of it, pardon my
That's
French, cameraman. But,
You could bleep it out.
But anyway, you could probably pick to get it set up and
That's good.
assist it with the intake and everything like that. I think it'd be a fantastic, but I think first and foremost is to get that webpage up and running, set a timeline, we get that done, the town sees it, and they're gonna say, Jesus, this board's, you know, means business, and not that no one ever has, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, it's just, but I think the webpage to kick and then start building upon that.
But, but this is all a means, a very important critical means, because nothing will happen if we don't have this communication structure. But it's a means to an end. The end is that we have boards and committees and studies and everything that have identified priority needs in town that we want to push over the finish line. That we know we need zoning reform, we want to push that over the finish line, we need to get to
Well,
a place where we can.
Why don't we go, I was about to suggest that we move the zoning reform, and let's get a sense of the priority of the board on zoning reform. And zoning reform means and I was on the bylaw committee, and it can be, shall we say, tedious, but it's very important. Do we think that going forward again with that zoning, it should be a
Hey, Jeff,
fairly high?
Can I just ask,
Yeah,
before
go
we
ahead.
move
Sure.
on to that, can we close the loop on communications?
Sure, go
Just-
ahead.
So I have on my list, town staff update website, which has been ongoing for forever. But, town staff inbound ticketing system,
Yep,
which might also include CRM,
yep, yep.
right? And then I do think, and this is the part I really wanted confirmation on, I think this is us, the select board, working with our town staff on outbound communication campaigns, including surveys for the major priorities.
Yes, and I would add that it's not just the select board, because the planning board
Subcommittees.
is doing
Yeah,
stuff,
Other-
the
and
harbor
the-
committee.
And the
Correct.
but I don't think, I think the select board is the key partner, if not the leader in, for example, making sure that we keep this moving to help them along.
My initial reaction was I didn't want us to be a pinch point. I didn't want us to be the slow point, but what you're saying is really we're the ones that can drive.
We
And-
drive it.
Information.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I
Okay.
wonder
Yep,
how,
great.
because the schools do a really good
They do a
job,
phenomenal job.
with this outbound kind of stuff, and I, you know, I wonder if there's a way to.
Well, you got kids in classrooms with very
Partner-
easy buckets.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
better segmented
Yeah.
target audience,
Yes.
but nonetheless, I mean, there's
Yeah.
obviously things we can learn, and, I mean, I'm sure all of you get asked questions about schools just as much as you get asked questions about roads, just as much as you get asked questions about whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So, to the extent that we can partner all of that outbound, yes.
But
So-
I just want to be clear, your goal is to improve your communications both outbound and inbound.
Communications
That's the
part two,
goal.
yeah.
And part of the
Yeah.
strategies
Level
for
two.
that is a more robust website, a better customer relational management to track the nature of the complaints, compliments, whatever that you're getting.
And a better way for.
And a better way to message major town,
Exactly.
major town projects, priorities, Jean, what?
Work. Yeah, everything.
how would you-
Priorities.
Priorities?
Pri-
Okay.
Priorities are priorities, and then you have the work.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Can I just asterisk
Sure.
that with just, you know, one of the challenges with that is just the open meeting law, basically. I mean, and the tradition has been for the select board, you know, that the questions flow through either town staff, so the town manager and or the chair of the board. So I think unless we, like, how do we do a newsletter from the select board? Is that something we would have to approve together in a public meeting? And, I mean, there's like some
I think the
mechanics there
vision
that.
could be, we could ask Justin to suggest an outbound messaging, an outbound campaign that includes us and how we can help, as
Yep.
well as the applicable working group
Yep.
and different channels for key priorities, not everything, it's
Yep.
gotta be limited to key priorities. And
Yep.
we put it on the agenda,
Yep.
and we discuss, and everyone has their marching orders, and if we need to do something on social media,
Yep.
and I've seen the school committee do this
Yeah.
on their hearings.
Yeah.
We can pre-approve, this is gonna be
Right.
our message,
Right.
so when everyone blasts, this is what you blast.
Right,
This is
exactly,
the
right.
approved, you know,
And this is why we're so grateful for this
Yeah.
position
Yeah,
and
yeah.
committed to it.
One of the things you want a template for that is, and some of the things that I get involved in professionally, is a positive requirement that all material facts have to be disclosed. And I think that's a good template, because what you say is you cannot argue in favor of a position, but you can say what the facts are about that position, and that avoids open meeting law issues, and that sets a template for our communications, that you're not saying Elm Street Corridor is good for this and this, or this and that. You're saying Elm Street Corridor will do A, B, C, D, and E, and will result in this, this, and this, studiously, neutral. And that really insulates the town from being accused of using public resources for partisan positions. So, but that's a basic part of, I think, what proper role of government communications. Private social media, argue, have fun. Different groups argue, have fun. But for the town, I think we need to do that. But Gina, you.
Yeah, I think we can work it out as we go.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
think,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
you
don't
know,
see-
you can always
Wordsmith
have a
these
majority and a
later.
percentage
Yeah.
view.
Well, but the
Yeah.
zoning thing, that's, the problem is I don't know how we phrase zoning reform by just the facts man, right? That's a really hard thing, because basically, I mean, the driveway question, sorry,
Go ahead.
is editorial, or am I going the wrong way?
Nope,
Okay,
nope,
fine.
you're good.
But that's, I mean, and I think we're going down a rabbit hole here, but that's a really good example of, it was a definitional change. That's what it was. The facts were, we defined, but then we had to describe the impact. And the impact is a method, is somewhat of an opinion, right? How is this going to, we have to predict what's going to happen, and some of that is visionary, and that is a policy thing, and we want to say, I think, we will go into, we have to be comfortable with the board taking a position which is going to advocate to protect the town. It's not just the driveway is going from 10 to 12, it's, we need to do this to protect people from these situations. So I agree, but I also think we will have to choose our points to be.
I would
I would agree with
bifurcate.
that.
Yeah.
Because you can say, this is what happened, this would allow X number of lots, and this would do that. On the other hand, the select board can, in fact, take a policy position.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think the
Then we can
select
advocate.
board, at a time, has a responsibility to
Absolutely.
make it. But as far as the basic template of communications, we don't, because, I mean, we don't take a position. But
Until we take a position in a
yeah,
vote
we
in public
can,
meeting.
but that's a
Exactly.
separate thing from this inbound
I have a
outbound.
suggestion on that, Robert.
Yep,
Right.
yeah,
I do too.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and also when we do
Zoning.
our outbound information, we take some time at a meeting and take a vote and identify the pluses and the minuses.
Yeah, you gotta vote on a warrant article.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, you have to do.
exactly,
But that's
And then-
that's a deliberative
correct, and then it's out.
opinion that we're doing.
Well,
now.
Jack, you can factualize, sorry to interrupt, but you
Yep.
can factualize. This is the outcome of doing away with a single law of exemption. All right, this is the facts, this is what is being proposed.
Mhm.
The board, other than later on, support it, don't if it's an individual person answering, but the facts are this. all right?
Exactly.
It's not, doesn't mean your house is gonna be torn down, The guy came up and said, I bought it because I was gonna build a cottage and then give the house to my kids. But he didn't tell anybody that the house has to come down because it's sitting in the middle of a double lot. So it's just not, something like that, so you don't wanna scare people, and they were able to, at town meeting, to scare the heck out of people, to get up there, like, I don't understand, I've done this, and I'm 98 years old, and I'm sitting there, and I've been owning my house for 90 years, because my dream was to give it to my great-great-grandchildren.
And now you're telling me
who passed
it's
away
broke.
before me, but I'm still gonna give it to them anyway. So, it's a pretty simple procedure, you just gotta,
Yeah,
really,
it is.
here's
Be
it is,
disciplined.
you tell the truth.
Yeah.
These
It
are
is.
what's gonna, these are the outcomes, these are the projected outcomes. We wanna preserve Cohasset, we wanna protect it. I think everybody in this town does. We
Yeah.
are at our carrying capacity practically. We wanna take care of this harbor. I mean, we've got a beautiful town. It's a gift, it's a temporary gift, is what we have.
We're protected.
And it's up to us to either keep it or really screw it up enormously. And we let people know that, I think people would fall on board, but I just think it's telling the truth, that's all. And that meeting was hard pressed because there's just people that, you know, put the fear tactics into others, and, you know, they did it better than the people that proposed it. And I felt bad for the zoning people, but I just think telling the truth will get you a lot further down the road.
Clearly, we have PTSD, special town meeting, December 2021.
We're having trouble moving on.
Yeah, I want to move past PTSD
Amen,
here,
Paul.
so otherwise we'll be.
Into zoning, which is what we're,
Zoning.
right, exactly.
So
which
let's
is where we
get
are
something
anyway.
lots of fun. But do we think that one of our priorities should be moving the zoning of some kind?
Do we think that
I
the,
think we're all on the same page there, Jack.
Right.
we do, but my confidence was shaken. I mean, it really was, because I think we all sit here and agree with Paul, everything you just said. But I worried that maybe the community doesn't, because I think when push comes to shove, when people say, oh, well, if I can't do this on my lot, then I'm gonna vote against it. And is it just communication, or is it that self-interest will always kind of pop up? So I'm worried that I worry that we spend a lot of time and energy on something which will, I don't want to say just fail, it's not really, I'm more worried deep in that. Cause a division, cause stress, cause other things to be distracted from, because we're and I'm not for or against it, I'm just a worry that I have.
But
Well,
you
that's
make
it.
it fair, you dovetail into what Diane said. If there's someone, if they're interested, they're gonna come out to play,
Yeah, right,
all right?
Right.
People always do.
Yeah.
If there's a good game on, they're gonna come and watch it.
right,
So town meeting historically hasn't been the most densely populated, we all know that.
yeah. well
And
said.
so, but they populated that night, and if you notice, it was a pretty good exodus after that vote got shot down.
That's true.
And I will also add to that, a lot of that particular vote, a lot of people that I know that are 100% in favor of it fell for the spin, and
Exactly.
you know, and
The fun.
we weren't there to combat the.
We didn't have our
that.
cards ready.
We didn't communicate
They were
enough and get the buy-in from the community. I do believe the community wants zoning reform.
Okay.
It's like the number one thing.
Well, what, so, I don't necessarily blame you, Corey, and on the capital projects, I'm almost agnostic on everything. I just want us to actually do things, get it across the finish line. I think there's a variety of things we could do. It's the question of what will people vote for, and what can we successfully move forward on. And so I do think it might be worth an inflection point where we have a lot of new residents, a lot of people have been moving in and out of Cohasset over the last 10 years. A lot's happened since that last study that was sent out. That was when I was living in Washington DC, 8 years ago at this point, or 5 years. And I think that it's worthwhile to go back and do that check, including,
Are you talking about zoning? Sorry, I lost you for a
I'm
second.
talking about zoning.
Okay,
I'm talking
cool.
about, here are the things we're contemplating, what say you town?
Okay,
What say you citizens?
So we
And
want
I
to do
would say
zoning
the
here.
same thing on capital too. Like, here are the things that, before we put huge money, time, and resources into, give me some feedback. Like, I wanna know, do we care about, for example, accessory dwellings? Like, do people here want more flexibility on in-laws? Do they want smaller houses? If everyone's like, wait, no, I don't want a smaller house, because I've been like planning a renovation for, 15 years, and we get an overwhelming, vibe, well, those people answering the survey might not be the ones coming to town meeting, but it is an important,
in both directions on that one.
it's an important pulse check on where the community might be feeling and where we can most productively focus
But we can also,
our limited resources.
we can choose as a group, I'm sorry, you were next.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we choose as a group to say, this is important to the town, this is important, we can be active, and we don't necessarily have to let the naysayers dictate us, and so.
That's true.
But we can choose, we can just say, we're gonna fight that fight, we're gonna fight it well, we're gonna fight it up front, and we're gonna, what happens, happens, but we're not gonna let speed bumps stop us.
All right, let's clarify. Is zoning important doesn't mean we're gonna take a position one way or the other. I've reached out on some of the local builders, and I've basically said, what would it take for you to, what's the things that really bothers you? What we want to decide is, do we think it's time, it's been 35 years since we've rezoned, is it time to seriously figure out what it is that the community will accept? That's all what I'm trying to get to. if we think it's a priority. I'm not trying to say, do we want the single lot
Right.
exemption, or do we want the private way, whatever?
But is that
it
just
the
a-
sense
I understand.
that we need to address
Do we need
zoning one way or
smaller
the
homes?
other?
I've got one for that, if you don't mind. We could do exactly what they did at town meeting, all right? Do a forecast of Cohasset 20 years down the road,
Hmm.
all right? Leave it alone, do a forecast. This is what we see, all right? There'll be a house where that birch tree stands, you know, if you can get away with it.
Get past Concom.
There you go, but, you know, to a degree, but they're getting bypassed half the time too. I forgot, I didn't know, I didn't understand, so that staircase is up, and, my wife's on it, so.
Yep.
But if you spell out the negatives, what's our forecast? What's gonna happen to this town if we don't address zoning?
Yeah.
And, you know, developers be damned, I'm sorry, it's not that I wanna take bread out of someone's mouth, it's just,
And developers will find a way. I mean, that's the
They'll
thing.
find a
The
way,
the
but
zoning,
this-
they'll work within whatever
I'm
we
not-
do.
They'll
They'll
work
be
within the
okay.
parameters, but
Correct.
like get up at town hall, we have people from out of town speaking, up at the town meeting, and, their only interest is because we have the loopholes that we have.
Yeah, so we've got
And-
goal two.
I just want to add that, you know, the master plan, and zoning was one priority within the master plan, was adopted, I think it was 2 years ago on the planning board, and the planning board just reaffirmed it in a unanimous vote. It's not ancient history. A lot of the same people are still in town. I know people are new to town, but people are also frustrated with the development. And to your point, we're actually kind of at a max capacity. So without putting some guardrails up, we are
Well,
looking at some
Okay, so the
serious
question
issues.
is let's not get down in the details of what it's going to look like, but I'm hearing from everybody that we think that addressing it is a priority.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so we don't have to
We need
decide
to put some more fuel
which
onto that.
bag foot, but, all right, so we have the zoning
So the goal is to bring it back to
rationalize the
town,
zoning.
It
Reform.
is to continue the comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite. We don't want to lose momentum on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And bring additional resources to the zoning bylaw working group for the needed changes that we've tried, and either have failed or haven't made it to town meeting. So finalize at least those two, right? Single lot
Include
exemptions.
Communication resources.
Yeah,
Just a
Because
point of
communication's the same.
point of information, we have Amy, forget her last name.
Yeah.
Right, who is working, not Amy from planning.
no, Amy from the town
Oh,
council on.
Town council,
KP, yeah.
is working with Tom Callahan.
Yeah,
Is-
absolutely.
So there is progress going on as we speak.
And Tom's eager to attack this, and I think you should harness that energy whenever
And
it
it's free.
exists. Yes, of course.
And it's free. Well, you gotta listen to Tom, but I love him. You can tell him I said that, I'll tell him I said
You
that.
just did, you're on.
Well, you know,
Oh, that's
Hi,
right,
Tom.
Tom.
we get something like this done, that's
Yeah.
doable, you may get some more reaction, you may get some people get sparked up and get interested in serving on some boards, because
Mhm.
we don't have a lot of people banging down the door to serve on them. Concom's going south, 2 people going down next month, you have, you know, it's, opening up planning, and so they
Like-
start seeing something, they may spark an interest, like, wait a minute, it does work.
And that's where perfection is the enemy of progress.
Exactly. Good segue maybe into capital projects.
Right, exactly.
But I think-
exactly.
I think to
Jean,
re-
could you, when you're done on that, could you
Solve
talk
the
about
capital project, right? Let's solve it, we'll go home.
Yeah, so I think on zoning though, because I'm just reflecting on, well, how to really make this work, and a part of this may be a pretty big deliverable, so I wanna bring it up. I think we need to get land council either through KP immediately, cause we're looking at Attorney Cutler to hire, and if she can't do it, we need to put out another RFP to get someone immediately onboarded. I think a land reform specialist, because I know, you know, she's the KP person, to help Tom. It's too heavy a lift for him to do, to rely on him alone. He needs support, and so I do think we need to make sure we
Well, and
can get
because
that assistance.
Because he's an elected official on the planning board, he
Yeah.
really needs to do
Yeah.
it
He
really-
within his body.
Correct, yeah.
He really, yeah, we need to harness this a little more within the town.
But we got crickets on that ARF, right, Michelle, on the So, like, how do we,
That was a
Well, that-
consultant, that wasn't a lawyer.
A little bit
It's
different
different,
on that.
that's different. That was more, sorry.
well, because we want to bring the resources in
It
for
was
comprehensive.
it was such a broad mandate that nobody could
No laws.
get could get their arms around it.
It's a small town, figure it
And
out.
it's a small town, and they realized, well, you people, that's fine, give us the city of Boston.
So we think if we
budget,
try again with
we'll
different
let them do
parameters,
that.
it'll be more successful?
I think so, but if you're looking for legal counsel, that's different, and you don't have to RFP legal counsel.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
It's a little more money, but
But we
so
can-
what?
we-
Yeah.
You know, I look for a land use specialist.
So Jean, you spoke to, you spoke about, capital plan, it's a
I have one, I'm sorry
capital
about that on
investment
zoning.
plans, but anyway, go ahead.
So just one more thing on zoning. In terms of the bylaw reform, and this will take some heft on the website, just wanna bring it up, but one thing we can do, which is what every government agency does at the state and federal level, is what you do is you do what's called the notice and comment process.
Yeah,
You
sure.
put out the proposed bylaw,
Yeah.
right, just like we've been doing.
Yeah.
And then you invite the community
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
proactively comment ahead of time. Tell me what you don't like, tell me where the issues are. If you're a developer, like, lay your cards on the table, and then you take it all in, you see if there's legitimate changes we need to make, we can address them if, you know, it also gives you guidance on, you know, bylaws that,
So what do we need to do, because Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, the zoning bylaw working group did public forums, and it seems like that probably wasn't enough. So it's, what
It's a
is the,
combination,
what is the
I think.
mechanism to get that, to, hey, come in, because if we're gonna host public forums and no one's gonna show up, we're kind of the same
I
problem.
think
Well,
that
people
segues,
show
I
up.
think that segues into the webpage.
yeah,
There you go.
it's
To
a
get an
webpage,
interactive
notice and
webpage
comment
that people can
process.
see,
Yeah, well
and
done.
they can, you know, that Gene, that's a great
Yep.
way of putting it, because I think if they're educated, and people that are against it are allowed to give input, like you just said, you
Or
might learn
pro.
something,
You
you might
do
learn
pro and
something,
you do
and you do
con.
pro and cons.
Here's the rub, and I think
Yeah.
it's what Katie Dugan was trying to tell us
Yeah.
when she resigned her role with zoning, with the Master Plan Implementation Committee, is that ultimately, town meeting is a legislative body, and they're gonna make that decision. So
Yeah.
the naysayers are still gonna swoop in at the end, and so it's all the
Right.
more important for us to take those positions
I would
To
agree
lead
with
on it.
that.
and to
Yeah.
lead and to come up with our
Not disagree.
FAQs. These are the goods,
Okay.
these are the bads.
I know, but
So
let's,
communication is,
let's move beyond PSAT on the zone.
Well,
Um,
well, no, Nia, Diane's right, but
Yeah,
what,
great point.
the notice and comment, like, you could put it out on Facebook, you know, favorite webpage, and then people who want zoning reform can just write letters in. You collect their information and you invite them to town meeting to vote on
Yep.
these articles.
Yep.
And so it has, you know, a number of different purposes, and frankly, if you're gonna get a lot of opposition, you wanna know
about
that
it
ahead of
Yeah,
time. and
exactly.
yeah, I
know
told,
what it
I'm
is.
100% behind you, I'm just saying, there's still that next step.
No, I
which
know, I know.
We have to
I
do a
know.
better job, you know, taking
I know.
positions on.
But it is a lift, so I think if we're gonna do it, recognize that.
Yeah,
because-
but I think that that's, well,
Do it.
I think that's a good point, and I sense the idea of the, call it the federal template of comment,
It's pretty easy intake form.
Pretty-
How we do it,
yeah,
the
so,
CRM process.
but
CRM.
one of the ongoing items is capital,
Excuse me for a second.
capital projects. And do we want what's called a capital investment plan, CIP, in which we delineate all the potential capital investments and then see how they're gonna be paid for? You wanna, Gene?
Well,
My,
Oh,
my, yes, we need this.
okay.
And we need to be sure that that doesn't get in the way of getting stuff done. To Gene's point earlier, there's stuff we need to know. We know, I mean, we talked about sidewalks, we talked about fields, we talked about town hall, we talked about harbor. I mean, said that Tim didn't have his chance. I mean, you know, a kid's gonna get hit on a bike, or we're gonna, you know, the harbor's gonna flood, something's gonna happen. And we could spend, you know, 2 or 3 years trying to make this plan and X thousands of dollars on this plan. And I think we need to do that, but at the same time, we have pressing needs as well that need to happen. So I think we need to be sure we're doing both. We're planning for what we need now, and we're also moving forward with how we plan for the long-term future of the town. Both are
Yeah,
important.
there's that operational and then the
Correct.
capital.
I've spoken to capital budget about that, and there seems an appetite for them, it's a natural place for it to live, and they think about that.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about how we're gonna replace the police cars every 5 years.
It's built in.
I mean, we have anywhere from 70 to $170 million potentially for the schools. We have the field study, we have town hall, which is probably 17 million now. I talked to Phil there this afternoon.
Yeah.
Probably gonna go up. So all these things we may or may not be able to afford, but I think we need to know.
Thank you.
Get some, well, anyway, that's just throwing out, what do we think about having some kind of capital investment long-term?
Needed, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I think to Corey's point, I think it's an and, like, there are projects that we need to push over the finish line, and I'm sorry Tim left too, because like, there's some harbor infrastructure things that we've been talking about forever.
Generations.
I mean, Town Hall is I know it's not a sexy project, and municipalities struggle with this all the time, but that building is unsafe. The elevator doesn't work, inaccessible, and there's been we've, invested X number. So there are things, the field study. I mean, we've identified, space and land that could address most of the needs for youth sports and high school sports. There's a possibility that we can act on some of these things that we know, that we've done the studies on, that we know have to happen and that are some things that are total needs, and some things that are wants that we could actually push over the finish line sooner rather than later. And, long-term capital planning still needs to take place. I mean, we have got out 10 years with school replacement roofs, but
Police and fire.
police and fire, et cetera, but
DPW.
we gotta break something across the finish line, as we do that planning. And then when the schools come up, we'll have all these relatively smaller projects that have been at least completed, or at
The
least
argument, well,
in
anyway,
the
let's
can.
go around and, Gene, Paul?
I'm gonna wait for a second, because I missed a start, so.
Oh, just very simple, capital investment, long-term capital investment plan, and Diane is pointing out that there are some immediate things where we know need to be done, so maybe we should just do those. So that's basically the gist of it. Capital investment plan is where you look at your major projects over a long period of time.
This includes town hall, schools,
And fields and
Fields,
fire station, everything.
Sidewalks, roads.
And you decide, do you
It'd be a
want it?
scary list.
What's it gonna cost, and then how do you pay for it, and you're gonna have to have probably debt exclusions, so you can raise money through bonds, and then as the bonds get paid off, you do a new project. That's what a capital investment plan. Capital budget, some of them are interested in at least considering adding it to their mandate, but that's where it is.
well, I'm a believer in taking the whole apple, not just a bite at a time. I agree with Diane, getting some of the things that we're rolling, if we can getting that, things that we can get done, solids. As, say for town hall, schools is, I would think, the best way of doing it is getting it over with, and
Yeah.
over time. It's not easier said than done, I agree with you.
Yeah, both ways.
But,
I brought up, while you were, just brought up sidewalks, and we have got, identified $5 million, and I said, one kid's gonna get hit on a bike, if we're gonna wait 2 or 3 years,
I agree with that.
why? Like, we know
He
there's a
doesn't
need,
need a
let's
bike
do it.
anymore.
Okay, that's, I've been through a car accident, so. I
Oh, your
don't wanna-
kids are too young, you haven't learned that.
Jack, you're being
yet.
recorded.
Anyway.
but he's absolutely right, Jack. As, that's, I said, is in regard to, say, Elm Street. And I'm not against Elm Street, but take it in context with every other street. When I drive by and see a kid standing on the street waiting for a bus, what's more important to me? A nice-looking street or a kid that's living?
Yeah.
That's the way I have to look at it. When my daughter goes down, I used to catch the bus. Same thing, they're standing on the bloody road.
Yeah.
Streets covered in potholes. So it's sad to say, we've allowed it, or it's been allowed to happen over the years, and, so we're at a tipping point, and you said that, I think earlier, we are at a tipping point, but how do you make it more attractive and palatable? I do understand that too.
Of course.
To the road point, I think one thing I would recommend, which is not part of the goals discussion, but we probably should have Brian Joyce, et cetera, come in and give us kind of an update on roads, because I hear about roads, we all do, that's probably literally the number one random person complaint is their roads.
It's on the agenda.
Thank you, because, I mean, there's a lot of roads that we can't do, there are priorities, we probably would realize, I don't know what the number is that we need, maybe we have $2 million a year to do road work, maybe less, and we need 5, and whatever that is, that's a whole nother thing, that's an operational,
Well, we
So
can-
that was
that's an override, and,
I was gonna touch that third rail.
but,
Okay.
but that's, we need to know that, what that looks like, and we need to understand what the road plan is, and
Well, so I think we could break it down into 2 components, because it's only a year. And so I think,
This is true. We're planning for 15
and
years.
I'll be watching on TV.
And our facilitator has gone silent because we've gone completely off the deep end.
She's very good at ringing his thing at the end.
I think the first 6 months, if we want to get it done, let's rip off the Band-Aid on the low-hanging fruit, shovel-ready projects with hopefully broad community support if they're shovel-ready at this point. You know, our debt exclusion deadline for getting stuff on the ballot is early August.
Let's do it.
So we don't have a lot of time. My list is sidewalks and roads. We already have a sidewalk plan from Katie Dugan. We need to look at that more carefully.
Absolutely.
We might need to do some outbound outreach before we figure out exactly where we want to land and talk to Brian.
But we need the funding.
And we need the funding.
need the funding.
Fields and rec.
Absolutely.
We've got a field study now. Town hall to me is a question mark. I know we're getting closer, but do we feel like you're gonna get a positive vote in
I-
terms of the outreach that's been being done at a debt exclusion?
See, town meetings passed it a bunch of times, and I do like doing this at this upcoming ballot because it's going to be the maximum input of residents showing up to vote. If we're gonna ask for a lot of money, I think it's our
I
legal
don't
fiduciary
disagree with you.
responsibility to get as many people possible voting.
My
So
question
I
is, do
think
you think
that's
they'll
where-
vote for it?
I think so, yeah, I think, but again, for me, and again, with town hall, it's always been, I don't care about the building. It's about the numbers, right? The numbers are, you know, we've done this a bunch of times, every time we get the same outcome, which is, we're gonna spend $8 to $10 million just keeping the thing upright. And it's not serving our needs, we can, you know, we're gonna get a worse outcome, and if you do the 30-year projection, we're gonna spend way more money keeping this building up than trying to leverage
Well, I don't
the
think-
work, so.
I've attended most of those meetings, I know a thing or two
You know,
about
yeah,
running old
absolutely,
buildings.
yeah, yeah.
There's there's no question that the building needs to be replaced, and trying to keep it going is more expensive. The $30,000 elevator that just went is a classic example. So I don't think there's any question. The question is whether this board wants to make that a priority, and do we want to have that as a short-term goal, where,
Like a 2-month.
2-month goal, where we handle the town hall, fields, and what was the other one called?
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks
And
and roads.
sidewalks.
Harbor.
Potentially harbor.
And harbor.
And
Harbor.
what in the harbor?
I think I think we need money for engineering and grant writing. I mean, Tim was here to talk about, you know, in order to get grants, we
Well,
have to get things
He
ready.
wasn't here to talk about it, because he
Oh,
knew
sorry.
he
Well,
wasn't-
he said
knew
this
he
in the
wasn't
email.
gonna talk,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah,
I
but-
told him he would be here to listen.
I think if you're doing a debt exclusion, we need a specific definable project.
Yes.
To tell people
A single one?
in the harbor, is it the captain's walk? Is it, like, what
Well, that, I think, is
specifically?
being covered, some of that's being covered through.
Well, breakwater. I mean, breakwater is just
Oh, breakwater.
alone
Right.
is enormous.
Resiliency
Look,
issue.
breakwater and those issues are so far in the future. We're talking about low-hanging immediate.
All right,
I
so.
think that's
I
can
mean,
ask
I've
you a
been on the
question,
harbor
Jack?
committee.
Sure,
for
sure. Yeah,
day
fine.
one.
What would be important to say Tim Davis? What's gonna
Right.
make him smile? What's gonna make him tell everybody? That's how you get word out. Low hanging fruit, but even if it's a small thing, what's gonna make him happy? Say, hey, listen, they're working for me.
Yep.
That's all, again, it doesn't have to be, dredging the harbor 80 feet and making it, putting, ton of striped bass in there. It's just,
Although that would be
what
nice.
what would make Tim Davis,
There
Come
are
on
a bunch
board.
of things that he mentioned.
That's what I'm
and
saying,
I
the
asked him to
low-hanging
put-
fruit. I'm
Exactly.
agreeing with that.
So we go to the low-hanging fruit, Parker Avenue ramp, that's already going on, putting a lift system for the lobstermen, that's already a lot of this is going
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
So when you get into the details, I don't think we have to worry, but we could have a catch-all, immediate, relatively low budget harbor stuff and put an omnibus. Bill, do we want to have an omnibus kind of wrap up all these low-hanging fruit and get it done with? Is that what we want to do?
We're asking for one capital number to cover boom, 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 boom projects.
Right.
And can I throw in-
Identified as priorities
right.
through the committees, like Tim's committee.
I'm gonna bring it up because I think it has to be brought up, school safety. We need to harden our infrastructure,
Well, we will do that.
and we need probably another police officer at the schools.
We will do that.
Well, we need to understand exactly what we need from our police and school committee.
Okay.
That's a conversation we shouldn't drive. And we should listen and literally, I think we're all ears on that for sure.
Yeah, but I think we have to mentally plan
Okay.
for something, because,
It's also something that in the past is covered under open meeting law for executive session, I believe. We
Yeah.
go into executive
Yeah,
session
it
on
is gonna be an
security, so I
executive
think it's probably something that would be great to discuss.
I just wanna put it on your radar, cause I did talk to
It's on
Craig McClellan
already.
about it.
Oh, yeah.
And they're doing executive session
Good.
on issues. But I do think if we can immediately get this teed up for the
Omnibus.
fall.
Shall we
is-
say the omnibus?
Yeah.
So-
That's important.
Can I touch the third rail?
Which is?
Go right ahead.
Which is
Are you
an
also
override.
standing?
Operational.
An operational override.
Do you think we're gonna need it?
The schools were $800,000 in the hole last year, and we patched that up. But they, Craig and Pat made a very, very convincing and passionate speech about, all the mental health services, teacher salaries, all the COVID things, all the things that they have that they think are mission critical. And, I'm not gonna be, I told them in that meeting that you don't have to sell me. I wanna give the schools whatever they need. You need to make the case outside of it. The other thing is capital planning. You said you talked to capital. We haven't changed the amount of money they get in 10 years, right? We
Capital
need
budget.
capital budget. So, literally, their amount of money is going down. We need to reset them, or else we're gonna go backwards. So, I know it's a third rail, but I wonder if we
Well-
need to sit down and do some math
Well,
on
if
that
you
stuff.
want to do that, now, the board can decide whatever, but I'll give you some practical. Now, you go for an override, and what you are sure is going to pass, there's a long and bloody political history in this town, and a lot of people who will be in favor of it, in fact, in the voting booth, won't vote for an override.
I understand.
The art is to do, using debt exclusion, to do what we need to do through our bonding without triggering the opposition. So, in the short term, the argument for the ombuds, right, is you take some of these things that individually in the school, safety will be part of that.
It won't be, I don't think the school safety will be part of the debt exclusion.
No.
Okay, sorry.
For the omnibus, whatever we
Yeah,
call
okay.
it. So we
Well, I mean, the
take
additional
these
officer.
things like town hall, like the field study, and we just get it done with.
Mhm.
We spend the money, and we get, because we have here, and here, we have a sufficiently broad political constituency to get it on the ballot in November and get it in August, and get it passed.
You wanna keep it clean.
If we get to the override and all that,
Gets muddy.
you should just
In that you need,
attainable.
that you almost need longer term planning for. Like, we need to get to that conversation where we need to tweak the annual operation of budget.
I think we need and it might be a heavy lift, but I think we need to do like omnibus November, but simultaneously be doing the long-term financial planning, both as to capital, because a new school or a school renovation, both are gonna be
Well, they're gonna blow, any calculator you do,
crazy
that's gonna blow that
expensive.
up. Correct, yes.
We might have,
We have
not
to
only
decide that
for the
overall.
schools, but for police with the new mandates, and we, in theory, won't need an override until next budget cycle anyway, because we're in theory good for this cycle.
Right.
Correct,
So
yes.
it's not like it's a November
That's
thing
what I think.
anyway.
Except the ballot question. That's why I keep going back to, if I'm gonna be comfortable asking the town for a lot of money, I don't want it to be 300 people that show up. I want it to be as many people as
I
possible.
think if you're talking about an override, more than
People show
300
up.
people are
Yeah,
gonna
this
show
is-
up.
That's
Yeah,
Totally
you
right.
want- You
I
want the
just-
fact check.
Don't
Totally
worry.
right.
Or
Never
new
mind.
We
school.
had to, okay.
Absolutely right. Thank you.
It's, yeah, but I think that it's critical, and we just don't have the time right now. I think we need to have probably a select board working group to help with capital budget. It can't, I don't think it can be just capital budget, because we have the schools involved.
There's gotta be schools.
We've
Sure.
got CPC, because they maybe, will take on some of that, maybe advisory. I think it
Yes.
should be select board driven, because we put the override on there and.
Yeah.
So we used to, select board had a budget planning group, 2 iterations, specifically to come up initially with the financial management policies that are 10 years old, and do need to be looked at. And it was, 2 members of the school committee, 2 members of the select board, 2 members of advisory, 2 members of capital. And of course, only the women on the group actually got the work done, I'm just gonna say that, but yes, I think we should look at that again.
Never mind. I wish to live, I'm not gonna say a word.
Well, that's where
Sorry.
communications is really important,
I-
like having our
You know,
communication strategy honed a little better, I
It-
think, in terms of
Yeah,
inbound, outbound, on
absolutely.
a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. That helps those committees out more than anything, and they're the ones in the
I
trenches.
have had some discussions with some people who are very skilled in their own private thing, about a blue ribbon investment management, capital investment management planning. I think we should do that, but for the purposes of setting our short-term goals, if we were, part of our things is achievable things, I think the idea of an ombuds,
Debt exclusion, but.
I don't know if we need a debt exclusion or whatever we need to do, but
Definitely
these.
need debt exclusion.
If you wanna get these done.
I do, but is that something that we want to do? And if we do, we've got some work done between here and August to decide what it's going to be to get on the ballot. But we need, as a board, to decide whether this is one of our priorities. So if we could just focus.
Yeah.
Let's be engaged, let's be excited, let's be communicative, and let's have a deadline. We
Is
have a
that
deadline.
yes? Is that yes?
Yes.
Just say yes.
Yes.
He's right though, deadlines.
Oh, I agree,
Yeah.
nothing gets done without a
So-
deadline. That's why we have an August deadline.
So is this-
That's gonna hit you up. Deadline for a webpage.
So,
No. Go ahead.
so we're saying long-term infrastructure is the goal, like infrastructure / long-term financial planning. First goal within the next 6 months is to try to drive home this omnibus bill.
Yes.
Do the
First,
ballot, the debt exclusion, figuring exactly what needs to be on it, getting that work teed up.
Yep.
Simultaneously, and this may lag a little bit because of the other work, but simultaneously trying to do some form of a select board work, a group or commission to be doing that long-term.
because it's, both are
Financial.
important, right? Because we want to be able to
Both are
say, if we
important.
can get this done now, then it looks like this. If not, it looks like this. To what Paul said earlier, by
Showing options.
by showing options, it makes the decision much easier to understand.
And I think a part of that planning too is not just using overrides and debt exclusions. I think we should be looking at other forms of bringing revenue into Cohasset.
Yep.
Like other
Think so.
towns, like other towns are doing. If they start moving on that, then, we might wanna consider it too.
I totally agree, and I think they have to be parallel and
Yeah.
with the ombudsman or whatever it is,
Omnibus,
omnibus bill,
not an ombuds.
debt exclusion, ombudsman, that's the relationship person, yeah, that's gonna be tough.
Yep.
He does everything.
The-
So is that
the
just-
financial planning, though, I just wanna
Yeah.
remind people that we don't have a finance director.
I know.
And there is, these are gonna need key staff,
We have a half of a finance
Liaisons.
director, because Don is, per Chris's email, going to be working. So I'm just saying, we may have more resources now than we have in 6 months. Is that, Michelle, do you think that's a?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I take that back.
We may just have to outsource some of
Correct.
this too, to be frank.
Right.
I mean,
Sure. Right.
Hingham gave us all their financial modeling, and a part of that's just inputs in an Excel spreadsheet, not to diminish the complexity of
No,
financial
no.
modeling, but.
No.
We can diminish Excel.
And there's
that's fair.
I
firms
think we
that
can
do
figure it
municipal
out.
consulting like this, but we definitely need to talk about that.
And whether or not
for a
we
while.
have a debt exclusion pass will affect the obviously the
Exactly.
financial plan, because you look at the debt burden for households,
Correct.
which will change based on whether they vote for the debt exclusion,
right.
from a tax standpoint,
Yes.
right?
No, we need to
Absolutely.
map that out. We
Yeah.
absolutely need to map that out.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is, okay.
Yeah.
So you guys can do that? All right, thanks. All right, meeting adjourned.
Yeah, you know, one of the
for
things,
years.
it's 8 o'clock, and one of my goals is to make sure that we're not sitting there till 11:30.
Thank you, Jack, you're the best at it. I do wanna just put something for us to start thinking about, and, is the staff and how overwhelmed they are. And we have to be super mindful of that as we carry all these discussions forward. Especially with hybrid meeting management, and depending on how that all plays out. And I know the Mass Select Board Association's doing a workshop, which I think Michelle's gonna be speaking at, just from a staff perspective of, you know, it's easier for somebody like Lauren Lind to manage meetings from home, clearly, because she manages 7 or 8 committees.
Which is
But
also
that's-
unreasonable. but-
It's completely unreasonable.
Mhm.
And even a new finance director, if they're a seasoned municipal finance director, that'd be great, but they may not be. And you know, there's gonna be a lot of push and pull, and I think we all just have to be very mindful of the impact on the staff, and the staff has to be with, as awesome as we all are, and smart and experienced.
Not our job.
It's not our role, and we can't just be out doing financial plans for the town, so.
That's, yeah, well said.
Well, and this is something that I put down somewhere where I think too, we probably are gonna need to consider condensing some of the working groups. We've got a lot
Yep.
floating around
Yep.
with the master plan now, and that creates a lot of workload on our staff too.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I think if we can maybe make it a little more succinct, particularly if we're gonna be creating new groups, or one group, I think,
Combine them, you mean?
yeah, maybe.
Or sunset some.
We've got to combine
I think it's a very good idea.
and maybe try to focus a little, I mean, there are groups, right? They're the select
Yes.
boards groups. I think we need to look at the charges and try to, again, focus, so that way you don't have staff being pulled in all different directions for like ideas that people are bringing up that are not necessarily the focus or priorities of what we're trying to get done.
And guess what, bringing some of these projects over the finish line, goes
Will
away
help.
with the study group.
It's gonna unload some of that work, actually,
Yeah.
or,
You
or
know,
bring resources,
So we
yeah.
can
That's true.
consolidate some
Gee,
because.
there goes zoning if we get that done. So they get to retire.
Yeah.
No,
One year
those
you're
will
done.
never, those hearing
Done.
boards are stuck forever. But, yeah,
Yeah, I think we should think about that
when
for
we
the next
start
meeting.
focusing on execution of projects, it's a very different lift than the study groups.
Absolutely.
Even with town hall, for example.
Well,
that'll
we're at the
change.
point with these study groups, it's either, you know, fish or cut bait.
Yeah.
They've been around,
Yeah.
we get it done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And so we're gonna
Decision point.
identify the ombuds bill,
omnibus.
omnibus. I'm
Omnibus.
Sorry, Jack, that was
Yeah.
my fault.
Yeah.
You're just thinking of, you know, fish fry or something. I don't know.
Fish fry.
But that's the purpose of doing that, taking these things, and a lot of stuff maybe get left by the wayside, but we're gonna take the priority things that the town really wants, and our guidance will be putting together a constituency of diverse groups, so we have the critical mass to get it passed. And if we diverge from that, and we have this and that, and throw this in, or, oh, what about my pet project here, or somebody said, it'll all fall apart. So that's the one thing
on the
we've learned.
cards.
Focus.
Be tight.
Be tight.
Yep.
Type.
Right. We
Great.
look at the prioritized things that we really need to get done as a town, not the wish list.
Yep.
Long-term, we have the blue ribbon, however that's constituted, but short-term,
Yep.
we're gonna have to focus on that, and that's all we're all gonna be doing between now and August.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Right, so, summer vacations,
Nope,
gone.
full speed ahead.
I think I'm resigning.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Get all that?
You have 3 goals, pretty much, really
Last year.
broad brush from 10,000 feet helicopter. You have communications, zoning reform, and capital.
Yeah.
Your
Missed
FY
last year.
'22 goals were communications, zoning reform, and capital.
Yeah.
So I want you to think about what you're gonna do different in the next 12 months that you did in the last 12 months, to have a different discussion 12 months from now.
I think in the last 12 months, we learned what we didn't know.
Right.
And that is huge. And now I feel like we all now, this is stuff we didn't know 12 months ago at all. Now we do, and I think that's a good sign.
Good.
You know? So it's different, it's the same, but I feel strategically it's very different.
I think that's an excellent point, and I want to add to Jack's point of adding a little more specificity to what you're going to undertake in the next 12 months. So it's a little more chunkied out, so you can have that achieved.
Yeah.
Okay, because we were maybe a little broad brush. But you have some work to do because you need to actually wordsmith these goals right now. I will caution you, though, that if you want to concentrate on the priority of this August omnibus budget, low-hanging fruit, debt exclusion, or whatever, that getting any real traction in anything on outbound communications, customer inquiries, or whatever, will probably be secondary, because the communication campaign in terms of setting that up for you will probably be a priority. So sort of have to have, now you have priorities, now you have to have relative priorities in terms of prioritizing your priorities. So just keep that in mind in terms of the bandwidth, and
Those two-
Justin's only been here since April, and we want to keep.
Well, it gives Justin a structure, right? I mean, this is, you have, what you will set up for this push will be the template that you can then build upon. So I see those two
And
solving each other.
I think communications is kind of the foundation of all of this. It's the only way we're gonna bring
But
these
that is
to
something,
closure.
we don't have to get involved in the day-to-day, we've already set the goal. We have a staff member, and that's why you have a staff member to implement, our goals.
That's right.
So the question is are there other specific things that you think we need to address? I think these, omnibus is going to be a big deal. We're not gonna have time to do much beyond that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, what I need you now is to do your statement in terms of your goal, and you were good at this, as I recall last year, Jack, in terms of, I was actually able to do one for the communications one, when we got in the budget, in terms of maximizing citizen outreach through more effective communications and expanding and increasing systems for tracking and responding to citizen inquiries and deadlines in a timely manner. Go
So
ahead,
the
Diane.
only word that I would change is the third, which is maximize citizen, I would say engagement.
Instead of outreach.
Because it's not all about outreach.
That's fine.
Citizen engagement by all of the above, the inbound, outbound.
Through
Citizen
more
resident?
effective communications.
Citizen or resident?
Good point, thank you, resident,
Whereas,
Or community.
yes. It's
Is the
resident.
word, is the website on this one?
Maximize.
Actually-
Resident.
Resident is everybody that lives here.
Right, residents of the
Right.
community. But
Including
there's
my
a
neighbors
phrase
who are
folks are
from another
using
country.
now.
That's
Well,
right.
I think
Like-
resident
Thank you.
works.
Resident.
Resident.
Yeah, I think
It's
resident.
like a synonym to resident?
I don't have paper again.
That's fine, we
Includes
can.
our-
Townie?
Yeah.
If we get all the townies involved, I think it'd be.
Alright, so now,
So what's next?
the next one is zoning reform, which has the components of the rewrite and bring additional resources to the committee for additional changes, including, and then a sub of that, just for consideration, that doesn't necessarily need to be in the goal, is bringing in the services of a land use attorney.
That's fine.
Okay, that was just.
Yeah.
That's it,
But-
done.
It's something, right, some
We-
edit of
we-
that, what is it?
I was gonna say, continuing the work of FY 2022 on comprehensive zoning reform and zoning bylaw reform, including bringing,
Legal, technical, and communication resources.
bringing on new resources and presenting.
And providing additional resources to the working group,
To the working group.
including technical support,
Legal, that
legal and technical.
means we don't have to
And
go
we
our.
could simply say
I
providing
listen.
additional resources or additional legal and blah, blah, blah. I don't think we need to say to the working group, because we just
Yeah,
talked
yeah,
about
yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
consolidate,
We
it
don't
doesn't
have to.
matter.
It
It's
doesn't
just-
Additional, Tracy, additional
effort.
legal and technical,
Mhm.
okay. Tracy is
Got it,
the one.
Tracy?
I got pieces of it, so I'm hoping me and you together.
You
will
can
get it.
recreate this.
Do we want to be explicit about saying we want a bylaw for town meeting? Or bylaws, or is that too specific?
You had that last year.
Yeah, let's.
It's up to you.
There's a deadline.
Next spring.
Yeah,
Spring.
annual, please.
Spring,
For
We don't
annual.
want that excuse, oh, we don't
Yeah.
do this at
For
special.
the annual.
For
Including preparation of
23
town meeting,
Okay.
yeah, ATM.
New school,
Right.
all new bylaws.
So
Then
continuation
we're going
of
home.
FY
Spring, omnibus in the fall.
22.
The school bus is in the spring, the omnibus.
Is it yellow?
Comprehensive reform zoning bylaw and providing.
For
res-
proposed bylaws.
Proposed bylaws and providing additional legal and technical resources for the 2023 ATM.
Great.
Yep.
Tracy, good?
Okay.
Okay. Third and final, which is
The easy one.
The omnibus?
omnibus.
Prepare.
We will,
Push over the finish line all the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Basically
It
it.
has a certain, a
Je ne
certain
sais quoi.
fruity.
Yeah.
Prepare a priority list of capital projects to be considered for a possible debt exclusion.
I don't think we have to say debt exclusion.
I don't want to say that either, but it's kind of what we're doing, so I'm kind of on the fence about
Well, we
that.
we can say, you know,
Well, you already have several projects that are already signed, sealed, and delivered.
Pretty
Yeah,
much
we-
shovel-ready.
So you
We
don't,
wanna
so
secure
present.
funding
There we go.
for
Yeah.
Present
shovel-ready
and secure,
projects.
right.
Develop a strategy to secure funding. Or deploy a strategy to secure funding.
what we really want to do is we want to get approval of the omnibus.
We want to get the omnibus ready. Yeah. we wanna-
The omnibus infrastructure plan.
Absolutely.
For shovel-ready infrastructure projects.
Yes.
And you want to present that to
Infrastructure.
town meeting?
Yes.
Special town meeting. And have it ready for the
Special
fall
town
ballot.
That's infrastructure is,
Sorry.
go ahead, Diane.
That presumes that we would have special town meeting in advance of November.
Don't need to do that apparently. I think we can,
You can put on the ballot before town meeting.
I think we can ballot and then town meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
It's gonna be either or.
Okay.
It needs to be
Because
both, but it can
Because
be
I looked
the
at the
order.
list
It
of
doesn't,
dates
it
for.
can be either or.
Really?
Special election,
Yeah.
at fall election.
So many days before the election.
Wait, do we need
has
to
be voted.
have a vote at town meeting subsequent to
Yes.
this?
You need to
Yes.
vote.
One's an authorization, one's an appropriation, but it doesn't matter.
All right,
So we
we'll-
can,
we'll get
Okay.
we can ballot it and then special town meeting it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And that would-
and just as an aside, you know.
Be a terrible
check
way for
with
that to
town
die, I'm
council,
not quite sure if that's the
make
best
sure
strategy.
everything's legal, whatever.
I got
Easy to
nothing.
pack.
Another kooky weird wordsmith thing, but I'm a little uncomfortable with shovel-ready, because that actually means something.
No, I would say infrastructure, an omnibus
Priorities or
infrastructure
something.
plan.
Right. And we're not gonna throw anything
And-
on there that can't just
No,
happen,
an
but-
achievable, immediate, a reasonably achievable omnibus infrastructure
Right.
plan for town meeting.
Because there could be a harbor resiliency project or something, or a
We just want to
electric
allow.
school
We have to
buses.
identify these things.
Correct, that may not be a shovel.
I know, we don't want to use shovel. We just
Present
want to be
Ready
Could be
very.
a-
projects?
take-
An
High
omnibus
priority-
infrastructure plan for reasonably achievable infrastructure programs. I have infrastructure
Yeah.
in there twice.
Projects,
Put another one in for
projects
the-
instead of
Project.
programs.
Project.
Yeah, project.
Okay, that sounds good.
Well
We
done.
we technically vote on this at another meeting, so there could be further.
Yeah, they could be further. I would
Wordsmithing.
just caution that everybody in the world is gonna come out with a project for this, and the board is gonna have to show some discipline. I think we know what we were talking about this evening, and we need to stick to our guns, because otherwise, it'll be a free-for-all at the feeding trough.
Here, here.
If there hasn't been a plan, then
Right, if we don't
Yeah,
already know
If you
about
haven't
it.
done a 10-year study, forget about it.
No, if we don't, if it's,
If
yeah.
you haven't done a 4 studies over 15 years.
Well, we're just
we don't
gonna
wanna do
have
it.
to, we're just gonna have to
Sidewalks and
unplug our
roads.
phones and not answer our
We have
phones.
those, yep, we have those.
So,
Those are things that
And-
make the most impact.
I'm in
Absolutely.
Right off the bat.
fine.
Sidewalks. Yeah, if we can get 5 minutes of
Except
sidewalks.
the town hall burns down.
Well,
Do we
gotta
wanna
be-
have the blue ribbon commission for longer financial plan?
Or just a longer-term financial plan.
Just
that
longer-term
the board
financial
has
Yeah,
to do.
longer
Yeah.
term financial.
That can be part of the same goal, Gene,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
establish, or appoint, which is your word?
Establish.
Establish,
A process.
liaise with capital budget to establish a process.
Everybody said everything they wanna say?
Yes.
All right,
The longer term.
and you've read that, does everybody agree with what's been presented? And
We got some work
Jack's
ahead of
looking
us.
for a motion, by the way, just letting you know.
I used to
think the
be
chair
able
can do it.
to say, motion to adjourn, but now I have to have, I can't do it anymore.
No?
You're at the mercy of the rest of
I'm
us.
at
So
the
let's
mercy
just
of
sit
the-
here, I don't know, do you want
We got cookies left.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Ah, Grady steps to the plate. We have a motion
about
to
low-hanging
adjourn
fruit,
made by
right?
Paul Grady. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion made in second.
We
All
can just-
those in favor, I guess we have to do roll call.
No, we're in
Ah,
person.
We're in person. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Oh.
2 hours and 15 minutes, and we got to eat.